Good morning, Justice. How are you
Good
doing?
morning, Syx. I am okay. It's one of those mornings. It's
Yeah,
Tuesday. You know.
I have an idea, yeah. And of course, there we go. I now have our split screen and we're finally up. My fingers didn't do their job this morning. I think they're still on the weekend.
That's sometimes how it be. Why don't you tell us a little bit about our guest this morning?
Mm, Ruven Ruven is a very interesting character that I've known from Vancouver for quite a while. It's kind of a long little dotted history of our friendship, but honestly, I worked with a magazine called Mainly Maine, which Ruven ran in Vancouver for Main Street, and that's sort of where we have most of our interactions. But I'll get to the exact reason why he's joining us after some good math metal this morning.
Right on.
So we have I See Aura, the song's 2020, and this is a shout out to Max Reed who threw this out for us. I appreciate you guys sending us links to your bands, and if you're not awake this morning, you will be right after this.
Illumination, the vision is clear. Reveal the secrets, the answers are here. Torturing vision, so we see the light. Expose the truth and hidden lies. We all seek the meaning of life. Is it even real? Complicated emotional chaos. Do you believe what you're told? Think for yourself, the veil is lifted.
Oh, that was a very good morning. Hello, Ruven. How are you doing, sir?
Good morning. I'm doing well. How are you? How are you, boss?
Awesome.
Excited. It's always nice to be able to sort of meet new folks this way.
Or old folks
Yeah.
in my case. Old folks, man.
Oh, yeah. That we are old folks.
Yeah. So
It's close to 20 years in some form for us.
That's the craziest thing, hey? I was kind of going over that in my head. Our connection was kind of even through probably the piercing and body mod crowd a little bit.
Originally, at the very beginning, for sure.
You had just had so for some of you that don't know my early past in photography, I did a lot of kind of heavy modded work as well, and people that had some scars and scarification, and you had just had an operation.
Yeah, I had a bowel resection, and you were really fascinated by that incision site.
And there you go.
Syx, why was that so interesting to you?
Scars are interesting to me. When I went to university here in Windsor back in the 90s, there was a guy named Chris Blanchino who had a scar project, and he would do these really large pictures of scars, very, very thin and long, black and white with texture, and then he would tell the story of the scar beside it. And there really wasn't an identity of the person, it was more the identity of the scar and the story. And that kind of started to, I don't know, it just rang a bell with me. I was involved in the modification crowd, so then I started to do kind of my own little spin on it. And I guess when you've got a fresh wound that's about 6 or 7 inches long in someone's abdomen, it's ripe for the taking right there, honestly. So that was...
I could have said it better myself.
Yeah, pretty much, hey? So you are in an undisclosed location. And
I'm in an undisclosed location. I mean, we all are to some degree, but I really am hiding out in the mountains since the beginning of March.
Really, that's pretty awesome. It's
a good place to be right now.
Everybody's probably like,
what
do you mean the mountains? Ruven is literally woken up super early, and he's in LA-ish, somewheres around there. So
in the Southern California mountains.
And he's so it's very, very early. So I appreciate that you're getting up and you're looking all bright-eyed. Justice and I complimented you on that shirt already.
You do it again, it's all right.
That's an awesome shirt.
That's the coolest shirt. That's the coolest shirt.
Thank you, Justice. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, we have, like we said, we have some history in Vancouver, and you started to kind of move around a little bit after I had left. So just kind of give us a little bit about what you've been doing since Vancouver, like this 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, because you left Vancouver, was it 2016-ish?
2015? 14.
2014, wow. Okay, yeah, where does the time go? So we were also neighbors, basically, in Vancouver as well, in the same community, same neighborhood. And I still live in Vancouver, but I was down here, I work here, I live here, I sort of divide my time. I'm the opposite of bi-coastal. I'm just go between the northern and southern coast. But I'm a serial entrepreneur. I love entrepreneurship. That was when I was in the body modification world. Syx, you reminded me, we had worked on a magazine that I had published in 2010 through 2012 or 2013 called Mainly Maine, which was focused on Mount Pleasant and the Main Street area in Vancouver. And I mean, yes, there was sort of the decline of print happening at that time, but actually for me, there was such an interesting thing about having this tangible magazine that actually had articles of merit and substance featuring prominent local figures. I was actually reminded of the profile you did on the art supply store when Stan passed away, and the great photos there, and actually how some of those photos were used in tribute for him, and how those were shot for Mainly Maine, and sort of what a wonderful time that was. And in some ways making me nostalgic for the past.
Mm-hmm.
But, isn't that what COVID and quarantine does? It's making you nostalgic for the past or for the future, optimistic. I was working on that. I worked for the city of Vancouver. That was one of the last, it's weird. I went from body modification to entrepreneurship to City of Vancouver. Normal transition to government,
totally.
Of course.
Yep.
Right. And then I was doing more entrepreneurships, doing some business consulting from there, and I ended up working in the startup scene of Silicon Valley. So I was going between Vancouver and Silicon Valley with some regularity, focusing on customer experience and customer support for connected device companies, IoT companies, of which I still do that today. So I go between Vancouver and San Francisco, or San Francisco and LA quite frequently. So that's what keeps me down here. I was here when COVID hit. If I had been in Canada, I definitely would have been staying in Canada. But I'm feeling pretty safe where I am, secluded in the mountains here. I'm not sure if you all heard, but in LA and other parts of California, they rolled back everything with some of the reopenings. Doesn't change anything for me because I go outside. It's just birds and coyotes anyway. But yeah, that's what I've been up to. Serial entrepreneurship. And then when COVID hit, still working, but I had this idea, everyone's sitting at home, and it went a little bit back to that mainly Maine theme, which is there's something wonderful about that tangible experience of picking something up, having it, and it's printed with a high enough quality you want to display it. And I was thinking about how wonderful it is and how exciting it is, especially as we all are getting more things electronically, less things by mail that we appreciate, postal mail, that's not bills or, flyers. Mm-hmm. So the idea of a quarantine specific card came up. So I launched, in conjunction with some other artists that I connected with on Etsy and otherwise, the Quarantine Card Company. So I spun that up at the end of April, a little later than I wanted. It was more of an idea I sat on for a long time. Ended up buying quarantinecard.com, which forwards to a different project that I'm working on now, and made it basically a 1-month pop-up, and sold quarantine cards on there. All the artists got a cut of the proceeds. I had the printer do the direct shipping to our customers. Oh, wow. It's a really fun, creative project, and it was really interesting to see people get excited about sending mail and sending postcards while they're at home. And I also made sure to include envelopes, because although it was a postcard, I didn't know how people felt about just touching something that had just been through the system without some sort of barrier. Right. So postcard with an envelope.
So this is essentially the reason, the impetus that I'm, that I got back in touch with you. I mean, it's not like we had really lost touch, but this is what I got in the mail. And it was totally personalized, which I loved, because just as you were saying, it's we're in a day of, where a lot of things are electronic. I pop out and I text and I message old friends. But I mentioned to a lot of people that friendship and those connections with people takes a little bit of work. And this actually it came into our house. We opened the thing. It was like, wow, this took a lot of work. Like, this was a printed card. It was very personal. And it really just kind of hit me, and it really struck with the idea of trying to keep in touch with people during this time. It's 2020. There's a lot of years, and great years to look back on that. In my life, I was very inspired by what you were doing back then. This inspired me to get in touch with you and really kind of push this around, because I think it's fucking hilarious. It's great. But it also, it shows that, you said it took me a while. I thought about this project for a while before I put it out. And you're like, that was in April? So a while for a serial entrepreneur person was all of 2.5 or 3 weeks, hey?
No, I think honestly, I thought of it right when, probably 2 weeks into quarantine. So it would have been mid-March. And I sat on it for about a month. And every week I thought, okay, I should do this. And initially I was just wanting to print my own batch of cards because I wanted to mail them out. I think it'd be a fun initiative. I love receiving cards, so I assume that people also enjoy receiving it. And being that we were truly isolated for the first time in our lifetimes, and hopefully the last time in our lifetimes in that regard by choice, it seemed like a fun way to stay connected that feels a little more meaningful than just random Facebook messages dropping in. But it also doesn't require, and I think this is the big thing, when you get a postcard, there's no requirement to write back. When you get a message, you feel that, oh, now I have to write this whole thing back, explain, what are you up to? They just wrote this whole thing to me. I'm not going to write now, though, because they really put effort into what they wrote. I want to give them the same respect in the reply, so I'm going to write back later, and then maybe you never do. But you don't feel that when you get a postcard. You don't feel any impetus to reply. You're like, this is wonderful. I feel great. This is a nice thing, a surprise to receive. And you put it on the table. You don't have to do anything. And there's something nice about that as well. There's no reactive need to take action.
I wonder if, having not really grown up in sort of like a postcard generation, or having, like, I grew up thoroughly with IM, and I think I remember when Syx first showed me the postcard, my first thought was, what are you going to do? Like, how are you going to respond to that?
Well, the answer, Justice, is just like this.
You're right. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's
you bring the writer on your show.
Yeah,
that's what you.
You talk about it. I mean, we bring it right into this new digital age where we can all just hang out in the same room. So, I don't fucking write. I'm not going to put a postcard in the mail. I mean, the first thing when I saw these was to literally think about going down to my basement, to my archives, and pulling out those photos. Like, I mean, I was just
send
like,
me a postcard back of my
your scar. Remember this day. And then,
I still have it, by the way. It's still there.
Oh, yeah.
It didn't go away.
No, that's true. That's the best thing about them. And I know I had a stack of the mainly mains sitting here because, like, usually with all my, around my desk, I have, like, most of my samples of work. The old stack of, and I've showed them to people when we got out here. And, people around here know that, well, what I'm doing here, Ruven, is just slightly different than what I was doing in Vancouver. Well, 180 degrees different. Your magazine was really the only magazine that I shot for editorially on a regular basis. Really. And I loved producing those images. And then when I moved here to Vancouver, or moved to Windsor, I left most of the teaching stuff behind and most of the nude photography, most of the BME stuff, simply because the city is, it's quite different, right? So now I'm shooting for, I guess, every 6 weeks, a magazine called The Drive magazine. And The Drive magazine is, again, kind of named for, aptly for, well, Riverside Drive, which is a big waterfront street here in Windsor. So it was neat to be able to bring in your publication into another publication and show them some of those examples of work that we did together. And Stan Rathman, all right? Yes, he sticks out a whole lot, and Mary from the Nice Cafe. Remember
yes.
The Nice Cafe?
I do, of course.
Yeah, so when I was producing...
do you know the Nice is gone?
I do know that the Nice is gone, yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry to bear that sad news for Vancouver people, but that was a sad revelation 6 or 8 months ago.
Yeah, it's, the whole area that we were in Vancouver... well, the word that gets thrown around a lot is gentrified. So the main Broadway, we were down in the Fourth Scotia area where there's a lot of like artist lofts, kind of became a little bit more, I don't know, it is gentrified. You got your Tim Hortons, you got all your Subways, you got kind of that stuff, and it took over things like, is a comic book shop still there? Like it took over some really, really cool places, and I think that comic book shop was bought by the employees or something. Very cool, awesome. Grassroots, but it's still around to my knowledge. So we're seeing a little bit of this.
It's not just the Subways and Tim Hortons. It's also $8 donuts and that sort of thing as well. You could argue on the flip side. I mean, both are forms of gentrification. Yeah,
we have Windsor's a smaller city, and the way that things happen around here is a little bit different. So areas getting, built up like this, there isn't necessarily a lot of the, the gentrification happening. There are more stores moving into the area. We live around Ottawa Street. There's more cafes that are opening up now, which is really kind of cool. And our little area strip is kind of building up. I think in Vancouver what happened is, well, like any large city, there's no more cool areas to go. There's no more other areas within the city, so this is why those kind of other areas where the lower rents start to get picked up by businesses. And here in Windsor, we have there's a lot of there's a lot of rental open, and there's a lot of places in the city, to kind of go and make your businesses. It isn't just little tiny pockets. It's pretty spread out here. So it is a little bit different, but it does leave us with those pretty cool kind of mom and pop shops,
Yeah.
There are like corners of Windsor that have that kind of charm to it, like what Syx said around sort of his neighborhood is gorgeous. I live in the suburbs, which is gentrification hell. Like the nearest grocery store to me is probably a 15-minute drive.
And it's a superstore, right? So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
I love all the small businesses. Vancouver is always so bittersweet for me, and it's sort of weird being in Canada, or being from Canada, dual citizen. I always wish. So it's weird. I'm actually more critical as an American a Canadian living in America, or an American living in Canada. Let's say, if you flip it, I feel more Canadian living here than I ever did in Canada. And Canada, I always felt more American than I can feel surrounded by real, actual Americans. Mm-hmm. But what's interesting, I think, to all of that is that looking at Canada, I'm actually more disappointed in Canada in some ways than I am in the U.S. And you're like, what? Have you not been watching the news? Yes, of course I'm watching the news, but why am I more disappointed in Canada? Because Canada already has socialist principles. Why hasn't basic income come to Canada? Yeah. That's already within the collective ethos. That should be the battle to do it, that it would certainly be in the States, just even on a state-by-state level. That's just so foreign to the individual mentality of the United States. But Canada has all of these wonderful socialist principles, and if a pandemic won't bring that in, and every month they're like, oh, you'll get a little more CERB, Canadians, you'll get another one, and every month all my friends are stressing out, understandably, but it's just like, look, give them a 3-month projection here. Yeah. People can't be stressing out every 3 days. Canada, you can do better.
Yeah.
That's all. That's my thing, is that I think Canada has the potential to do better. Maybe I have more faith in them at the end of the day. That's what it's about.
Yeah, well, I'll kind of flip this back around. I did not apply for CERB for the first 3 periods, I guess, that you could apply for the first 3 months.
Yeah.
We had, luckily a couple of larger jobs that happened, so I was able to creatively just kind of float a little bit. And in the back of my brain, I'm like, okay, if they allow us for a 3-month period, I can kind of like, maybe I'll just make it through this 3-month period. And then the lockdown continued to happen, and it really did start to get scary because, I got a hydro bill. We have a little energy company here called Enwin, which is a horrible monopoly that is literally like, it charges you different rates at the time of day. So when it's really heavy, they charge you more for your hydro. But at night, your hydro is a little bit cheaper. So I got a $1,000 kind of hydro bill, and I was like, oh my God, like I have to pay this, because they're like, you can't let this sit. Or even if you can let it sit, it doesn't go away. So I had to apply, and I was able to apply for those 3 previous periods, including the next one that was coming up. So that actually kind of blew me away that they did make it that easy, because it was a pretty simple process. But I do agree with you with the dangling of the carrot, but we all don't know what's going to happen, right? So they only are extending it kind of, I think, as long as the lockdown is going to exist. So that we just this week got announcements that, I shouldn't say most of Ontario. There are parts of Ontario that are now moving into phase 3. Major portions of Toronto and where we are in southeastern or southwestern Ontario near Detroit are staying in phase 2. So, we're still kind of behind the ball here. And, like you mentioning being a Canadian in America or American in Canada, when you live in Windsor, we are literally surrounded by Detroit and Michigan. And the numbers across the border are just scary. And the borders are locked down. So we are in an area where things are kind of a little bit of a hotbed, and we're moving a little bit slower. So CERB's helping out. I just don't know where it's going to go, though. Justice, sorry.
I think... Yeah. No, I think Ruven, what you said about kind of like dangling and not giving like large projections also applies to sort of what's going on with the border as well, because the majority of Canadians don't want the border to open back up, but the CERB and like the lockdown, it's only being announced that it's staying closed a couple of weeks into the future or a month into the future. So people are getting anxious and nervous and weird all over. So it's sort of, I think you're right that Canada Canada holds itself to a higher standard and should be acting accordingly.
It would be nice to see something like, that minimum income, that base income level.
Really,
let's get rid of the CERB. We could get rid of unemployment at that point. You could get rid of disability. There's just a premium you would get if you're on basic income because you have a higher expenses for medical purposes. Yeah. But that way, no one can view anything as a handout. Everyone's getting the same. There's no need to apply. And this just seems like a great opportunity for Canada to really just make that happen. I'm optimistic. I'm not hopeful, maybe, but I'm optimistic.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And I think that leads kind of phenomenally into one of our favorite segments, which is what are you doing to stay optimistic? What is like a daily routine or daily ritual that you engage in that helps boost your mental health?
Besides screaming into the wilderness?
Oh, that's so fun.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so I've been fortunate. I have been working throughout, but of course, this is a unusual time in terms of isolation, socially and otherwise. So I try and do a video call with a friend at least once a day to have some outside non-work social interaction that's face-to-face. Because I don't go out. Even though they rolled back the quarantine and we got fairly far along in the various stages here, my routine didn't change because I don't think much is changing in terms of the data other than the economic reasons to push for opening. So the biggest things that I do to stay active is go outside, get into nature. That's honestly the best thing you can do. I'm in the country, so it's a lot easier to get out there. But even in the city, just going to a park, getting to some green space, so important. Get out of your house for a little bit, especially now that the weather is warmer. Distance from people, but get out. But it's also talk to people. I think people aren't talking enough. They're waiting to the amount of stuff that I'll have to say to my friends once this is over. No, you're not going to remember what's happening now, and the effects of this are accumulative. So, talk to your friends, talk to your family, reach out. I think that's especially important because this is going to be, I fear, drawing out for quite a while yet, including in Canada. So, make sure to stay in close contact with people, get out in nature, and honestly, just, one day at a time, even if they're announcing it only 1 month at a time, one day at a time. Yeah. But I think everyone's getting into the routine. But don't be complacent. Let's still be smart. Wash your hands. Be safe, I think, because that's what the biggest thing I've seen that's scary. That people put themselves more at risk, even smart people, as we get lazy, as we get into our habits, that this is just how we are now. So let's stay diligent.
And I think just one more thing about, calling friends. I really like the idea of talking, but the idea is to also change the conversation. I mean, don't get stuck in the echo chamber of kind of what's going on and how bad and the numbers. And there's a lot of stuff to talk about and a lot of stuff that's heavy. But ultimately, when we connect with friends like this, sometimes little conversations come up that make you remember something that is, for us, it was a magazine and stuff, but I did not expect you to have that painting on the wall. So why don't you, for all of our Vancouver people, just let us know what that is?
This is a painting by an artist called Eugene Brenthal. And Eugene is a known sort of character of the Mount Pleasant area. Sometimes, I think, certainly you remember him, Syx, from your days in Mount Pleasant. Sometimes he'd be asking for some spare change. That would be how most folks would know him in Mount Pleasant. Yep. And I like watching his Facebook. He can post some interesting things, and he posted this painting, and I picked this up on one of my most recent visits back home. So it's sort of a nice reminder of that whole scene.
Of that time. Person, and that little, can spare change, please?
Yeah, that's right.
And, Windsor has our own. We have our own, kind of personality. He's the feather guy, a guy with a feather in his hat, and he's been around the city forever. He's actually memorialized, not memorialized, he is painted in some of the murals around the city. So it's kind of cool. And that little piece of art, when you said that, it's like, some of those mornings that I would leave my apartment and kind of walk somewhere, I'd remember that. I'd remember hearing him, and then I'd walk into a coffee shop and I'd see you. And it's great to bring back of that. Ruven, I appreciate that you have got up so damn early to join us. I really
only an hour earlier than usual. I'm an early riser, Syx. It's been fun. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, and this honestly was great. So as soon as your second round pop-up comes up, we will be sure to push that out on our end, because it was really great, and I like that. Again, it's supporting other artists and putting some money back into their pockets during this hard time. Thank you so much for joining us.
We're gonna be back for the second wave, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, phone call number 2.
I just know it's
phone call number 2, right? And another shirt.
Yeah, right.
All right.
It was a pleasure to meet you, Ruven. And
nice meeting you, Justice. Thanks again.
Thank you very much. Yeah, absolutely. And thank you to everybody who tuned in this morning.
Yeah.
Have a wonderful rest of your day.
See you tomorrow.